the same people who brought you Iran-Contra, this organizational structure is what they created as the organizational structure for NED. What NED is now a 40-year running Iran-Contra scandal at its heart. And so is every institution that touches NED. I've been doing this thing where I've been going one by one through the board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy to highlight their role in completely abusive and anti-democratic practices weaponized domestically against us, the people paying them. And I've been focused on the board of directors for the National Endowment for Democracy because they are the ones who hire and fire the officers. The NED board structure is set up specifically to stop the democratic process. I'm going to read now from page 18 of Walter Raymond, the architect of NED. Before he went on to be the main point person for Project Democracy, the National Security Council code name for the National Endowment for Democracy's formation project. For 18 months between 1982 and 1983, he led Project Democracy. He came up with the structure about NED's four cores, the IRI for the Republican Party, the NDI for the Democrats, the Solidarity Center for the unions, the CPAY for Chamber of Commerce. For 30 years, he'd been an intelligence operative before he was tasked to do that as the head of the intelligence directorate of the White House National Security Council. So in 1954, he begins doing intelligence work for the U.S. military. Then he becomes a political and information officer with the State Department. As we covered, at that time, 48% of all political officers in the political affairs branch of the State Department were not State Department officers. They were CIA under diplomatic cover. Does that for 10 years. And then he goes to work directly for the CIA for 12 years. From 1970 to 1982, he led clandestine media operations for the CIA and was awarded the CIA Intelligence Medal of Merit. This is the guy who came up with this brilliant, clever structuring of NED as an outside enterprise to be used as an outside NGO, to be paid for the government, but to be not formally the government, so it can do the dirty work the CIA wants to do, but doesn't want to get caught holding the bag of the dirty ops if the operation gets busted. So when we go to Walter Raymond, CIA Intelligence Medal of Merit winner for secretly controlling the media via the CIA, what you'll see is a document called Summary of Proposal for a Study of Programs to Develop Democratic Forces Abroad. There were not enough programs to develop democratic forces for the CIA to develop political parties, to infiltrate unions, to control newspapers. I wonder why CIA Director General Michael B. Hayden's on the board of NewsGuard. Establishing such programs would require the utmost care. This is coming from the guy who for 12 years led secret media, clandestine media operations for the CIA, and at this time was running the intelligence directorate of the National Security Council. The people we put in charge will have to exercise the utmost care. Those managing NED's programs must know the international political environment they're working with. The programs must be free of the implication they're being run by the U.S. government, says the U.S. government. These programs must be free of the implication that they're being run by the government, even though they're being funded by the government, coordinated with the government, but they must be free of the implication so that they can serve as our plausible deniability cloak, our NSC 10-2 get out of truth free card, so that we can not be lying to Congress when we tell them, oh, the CIA had nothing to do with this. This is run by outside NGOs. But the reason I bring this up right now is to draw your attention to this line right below it. They may need the NED family programs, NED, NDI, IRI, Solidarity Center, CPAY. They may need substantial government funding, but must not be vulnerable to alternation of party control and policy. Do you see how dastardly this is? Let this wash over you. This is the U.S. government, the CIA, and the intelligence wing of the National Security Council proposing to set up the #1 head of the censorship industrial complex 40 years ago. It's not all it does, obviously. It does rental riots. It does smuggling networks. I was going to say rigged, but I'll be charitable. I'll say influences elections. You name it. Every manner of intelligence sabotage. They've got specialists who are professionally trained to do it. That's saying they're going to need substantial government funding while free of the implication that it's being run by the government. Every year, they're going to need lots of government money, but must not be vulnerable to alternation of party control and policy. So this is the CIA and the intelligence wing of the White House saying NED has got to get a permanent taxpayer money spigot. We have to design NED in a way that they get their money, substantial government funding, regardless of who wins the election. They can't be vulnerable to alternation of party control, meaning an election happened and the electorate voted for a political party led by a candidate who doesn't want to do the shit NED wants to do, the CIA wants to do, or policy. If we decide, actually, we don't want to do this here. This is exactly what Arthur Schlesinger identified as the problem in his 1961 memo, CIA Reorganization. I submit the following views as one who worked for the OSS during the war and served as a periodic CIA consultant in the years since. What he says here is that the CIA has hijacked U.S. foreign policy that's supposed to be set by the State Department. It's supposed to carry out clandestine operations to clandestinely assist a U.S. State Department policy. But he says that the CIA's trouble can be traced to the autonomy with which the agency has been permitted to operate. It is not vulnerable to alternation of party control or policy. So the CIA Medal of Merit Intelligence Award winner from the Intelligence Directorate stresses we have to set up NED just like we set up the CIA. So no matter what people vote for, we can do whatever we want. No matter what policy set by the State Department on foreign policy in a particular country, we can do what we want. This is the problem Arthur Schlesinger identified in the CIA organization memo, an inadequate conception of the relationship between operations and policy. So he writes, the CIA conducts three main forms of secret works: clandestine intelligence collection, covert political operations, and paramilitary. It carries on these functions with relative autonomy. Those reasons are historical. When the CIA began, the State Department, still thinking too much in terms of traditional missions and foreign affairs, looked on the new venture with suspicion and renounced the opportunity to seize firm control of CIA operations. Now, part of this is because that is what was necessary for plausible deniability. Allen Dulles was the CIA director while his brother, John Foster Dulles, was the Secretary of State. They were brothers. Oh, in fact, he even mentioned this. After 1953, the fact that the Secretary of State and Director of CIA were brothers further confirmed. Why does that confirm independence from supervision? It actually doesn't. It says that this is not a bug. This is a feature. The State Department wants to not be apprised of what autonomy the CIA is exercising in operations. That way, the State Department can tell the world with a straight face, we didn't authorize this. We don't have any footprint on the ground, the State Department, the diplomat can say. In fact, when we watched Counterintelligence, the documentary, we played scenes where CIA senior officers would say the main blocking point is the State Department. And when there's something the State Department knows needs to be done in a dirty way, they will tell us the goal they're trying to achieve and then walk out of the room saying, I don't want to know how you do it. Just get it done. That is intentional. But he goes on to say that while state retained supervision over covert political operations, this was offset by various tricks around autonomy that the CIA could wield. And in particular, goes on to say that the preponderance of CIA undercovers at state encroaches on the State Department's policymaking functions. Well, this is what the CIA designed for NED. That independent of whatever the new Secretary of State wants to do as a matter of policy, can't change the policies of NED because it's a private entity. All they can do is threaten to shut off funding, which they won't do because of the donors. Once it's funded, must be no way to make it vulnerable to a change in policy. It's exactly what Schlesinger warned about. Now, you have to understand at this time what was going on. 2 words. Say it in the chat. Iran-Contra. Iran-Contra was the attempt to get around alternation of party control influencing the policy set by the National Security Council. What was happening in Iran-Contra? Jimmy Carter had just neutered the CIA. They did the Halloween massacre. They fired 30% of every CIA operations officer. They crushed its budget. They created the Senate Intelligence Committee to oversee it from the Senate. They created the House Intelligence Committee to oversee it from the House. They put a ban on things it couldn't do. And then in 1979, we lost Iran, and it was widely blamed on us having handcuffed the CIA. And Reagan's backers wanted to get Iran back. They also had to deal with the Saddam Hussein problem, and they also had to deal with the Cold War going on. Remember, the Cold War didn't end until 1990. So the whole 1980s were the high point of the Cold War. So how are we going to do that with a neutered CIA? Well, you do it by standing up a CIA independent party control or change in policy. Democrats were pissed at the CIA at this time. The CIA targeted half of the Democrat Party the same way the CIA is targeting half the Republican Party today. The House of Representatives, controlled by Democrats, passed a ban. It was called the Bolin Amendment to prohibit any U.S. taxpayer funds from being spent to overthrow the Sandinista regime in Nicaragua. At the same time, there was an international arms embargo on Iran after the 1979 revolution. So the main foreign policy point of focus of the early Reagan administration was finding a way to give arms to Iran around the embargo to stop Iraq, Saddam Hussein, from getting regional hegemony over the Middle East, and then find a way to fund the Nicaraguan Contras despite an alternation of party control prohibiting that funding via policy. So they set up what Oliver North would refer to as a self-sustained, standalone, off-the-shelf private enterprise so that it would not be the government doing this. It would be outside NGOs. It would be outside front groups working with the government, being coordinated by the government, by the National Security Council, the same National Security Council whose intelligence directorate was run by Walter Raymond, 1982 to 1983. And then he stayed on the National Security Council as senior director for international communications and information until 1987. So all the way through Iran-Contra, he was on that very National Security Council. And during the creation of NED, he was the head of the intelligence directorate. Bill Casey, director of Central Intelligence, who Walter Raymond worked for before that, was back channeling all of this with the National Endowment for Democracy. This is in 1984 when the House tried to strip NED's funding. And so they had to work with Democrats in the Senate, worked out a compromise with Democrat Senator Bill Proxmire for this agreement about NED. And here is the public release on the National Endowment for Democracy, a non-binding, toothless agreement that they will only do such intelligence activities as jointly agreed in future negotiations with Senate oversight. I mean, it's so funny, right? This is what they said. This is a non-binding agreement that we, the CIA, will not use NED to conduct intelligence activities, except as jointly agreed to in future negotiations with the Senate Intelligence Committee with regard to the definition of intelligence activities. They're going to say NED does no intelligence activities at all. They can just suggest that NED does it. If NED wants to keep getting funded by the Senate, NED will do it. And then the CIA can say it's not an intelligence activity. It's a private independent NGO who did it. What a scam. But it's all made possible because the power is put into NED's board of directors. Do you understand?
The director was interested in the ability to go to an existing, as he put it, off-the-shelf, self-sustaining, standalone entity that could perform certain activities on behalf of the United States.
What you just heard, he's referring to the Director of Central Intelligence. What he wanted was a private, standalone, self-sustained, off-the-shelf, meaning you can pick it up or put it down, a la carte. It's there if you need it, anytime. That exists outside the government, that can be used by the government so that it doesn't look like the government's doing it. And technically the government isn't, because it is being done by an outside entity that's funded by the government, directed by the government, working every step of the way with the government, but it's private, standalone, off the shelf. This same structure they wanted for Iran-Contra, the ability to do things through this private network that would look non-governmental, off the shelf, can pick it up or put it down at any time, standalone, it's an outside NGO, self-sustaining, it's funded in a separate allocation every year by the government. We don't need to rush as the CIA to get outside funds, to sell crack, to, launder gun money, to go to one of our, friends of the station, a Jeffrey Epstein type, to get his donor friends to pitch in. The same people who brought you Iran-Contra, this organizational structure is what they created as the organizational structure for NED. What NED is now a 40-year running Iran-Contra scandal at its heart. And so is every institution that touches NED, every university, every labor group, every union, every legal group, every rule of law program, every NGO, every private foundation, every paramilitary group, every group of street protesters, every political opposition. So where we are now is, okay, the only way to bring NED in line, to make it vulnerable to alternation of party control now that we won the election, is to change its officers running it. And by Walter Raymond's design, it is structured so that in so-called independent board of directors, rather than the government picks those officers and NED picks its own board of directors. So what I have been doing has been attempting to highlight this problem so that reform efforts can be exercised over both NED and the entire constellation of NED family entities.